Welcome to the Age Has No Limit podcast. If you're a person who is in your 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, or older, who was taught to stay in your lane, or maybe you believe your age limits you from pursuing new adventures, exploring new destinations, or that business idea you've been nursing, I invite you to stay and listen to the Age Has No Limit podcast. I'm Patrice Davis, and I'm the host of the podcast. I'm a mom of three, the CEO of Grants Works Consulting, and the founder of Ready, Set, Go Consult, a consulting business accelerator. I started a consulting business at 49, traveled to multiple countries, found the courage to love again, and I'm just getting started. Each week, I highlight ways you can live on your own terms, share tips on how to start or grow a business, and I feature guests who chose to redefine their lives and live outside the box in their own way. If this sounds like something you'll enjoy, stick around for this episode. If you're listening to us on your favorite streaming platform, please download this or any of our past episodes so you can listen on the go. If you're watching us on YouTube, please subscribe. It's the Age Has No Limit podcast. We're here to show and prove that your age shouldn't prevent you from designing and living the life you want. I'm your host, Patrice Davis. Let's get started. Kirk Adams is the immediate past president and CEO of the American Foundation for the Blind, where their tagline is very similar to ours, which is no limits. After 30 years in nonprofit leadership, he moved back home to Seattle from Washington, D.C., and launched a consulting practice just 2 years ago. He spends his time working on fun, innovative, high-impact projects that accelerate inclusion of people with disabilities in the workforce. He is an advisor to and shareholder in 3 startups in the disability access technology space. He's been blind since age 5 and strives to become the person he needed in his life as a blind child, but did not have. Kirk recently launched his book, The Disability Dividend, Supercharge Your Bottom Line Through Disability Inclusion in October 2024 to coincide with the National Disability Employment Awareness Month. Kirk, with everything that's happening now around, access for different types of people, I'm so excited to have this conversation with you, and I welcome you to the Age Has No Limit podcast.
Great to be here. Thanks so much. I'm really glad we connected, Patrice.
Thank you. Thank you. So let's start with some of the ways you are being the person. You're no longer striving. I think you are definitely being the person you needed as a blind child that you did not have.
I think it's really by being available and accessible and present in the community and being a resource, whether in large or small ways, to families and individuals who are blind. My retinas both detached when I was in kindergarten. So I was a sighted child one day and a blind child a few days later. My parents were in their mid-20s. They were both starting their teaching careers as public school teachers. They had honestly never met a blind person before. I was told, or they were told, Kirk can't come back to school here at the neighborhood school. He needs to go to the state school for blind kids. So they visited the Washington State School for the Blind and weren't impressed by what they saw there. Visited the Oregon State School, were very impressed, and quit their jobs, moved the family, so I could go to the best school available to me in the Northwest. So, thank you, parents, for doing that. So I went to that school for first, second, third grade, learned Braille skills, how to travel confidently with a white cane, how to love my body as a little blind kid, how to be confident. Learned how to type on a typewriter so I could start in a public school in 4th grade. But from 9 years old on, I was the only blind student in any of my schools. I lived in small, kind of rural towns in the Northwest. I didn't know any blind adults. I didn't have any role models. An example I give was when I was a senior in high school. I was kind of with the college-bound group. And first period, we all went into physics, and second period, we all went into math analysis, and third period, we all went into chemistry. And the
Mhm.
chemistry teacher just said, no, you cannot you cannot take chemistry. It's a safety issue. You're going to need to go to the office and get a different class. And I went home and told my parents. I was quite upset. And
Mhm.
they said, well, and they were teachers. They said, well, if Mr. So and so says, then that's that. So, I was given a study hall third period. I sat in the library and read, trashy novels in Braille, third period my senior year. But
Yeah.
now, I didn't really get involved in the blindness community until I was in my 30s. But now I've met blind chemists,
Mhm.
blind chemists who started and sold companies for multi-millions of dollars,
Mhm.
PhDs in chemistry who are blind. I've met blind people who teach chemistry at the university level. So
Yeah.
I know I was not told the truth at that time, but I was not told the truth not because people wanted to mislead me. It's because they did not understand. They did not have the facts.
Mhm.
So their justified belief in the capabilities of people who are blind was very inaccurate. But
Mhm.
now I know a lot. Um, after being in the space 30 plus years and really focusing on creating opportunities for blind people to thrive in employment and careers. I just want to be a resource for people, and I want to be able to talk to parents of blind children and let them
Mhm.
know, yes, your blind child can thrive just as well as your sighted kids can, and their neighbors and their classmates. And there are some things we know that are necessary for um, putting your child in a position to thrive as an adult, but
Mhm.
it's not rocket science. Um, there's research. We know what it is. You can learn it. You can do it.
Awesome. I have several things, but I'm going to pick up on three of the things that you said, but several things. You really provided a really great summary of what your experiences were initially, how it was addressed by your parents, some of the challenges you were told existed when in fact there weren't really challenges or roadblocks. But as you said, the adults at the time did not know that there were all these possibilities. Let's start with the name again of the illness that you had.
Yeah.
Our audience can know exactly what that is.
Yeah, it was not an illness. It was a bilateral retinal detachment, and it was caused by hemorrhaging of some blood vessels in my eyes that caused pressure, like a glaucoma pressure, but very intense. And the pressure from the hemorrhaging detached the retinal tissue from the back of my eyes. And it could
Mm-hmm.
have been a playground accident,
Mm-hmm.
cause indeterminate. But
Mm-hmm.
I can remember I was in kindergarten and got on the bus to go home to the neighborhood and got off the bus at the corner of our block. I just had a 1 block walk to the house, and it had snowed a little bit. And everything looked so different. I couldn't tell where I was. I was
Mm-hmm.
very disoriented, and a neighbor found me crying in her backyard and recognized me and took me to my mom, who took me to the doctor, who sent me to the hospital. And
Mm-hmm.
I had some retinal surgeries that weren't successful, and quite a number and series of surgeries, from age 5 to 12 or so. But the good news is, as we have advanced technologically,
Mm-hmm.
this was before laser surgery. Now there's laser surgery. If people experience retinal detachment, they can do so much with lasers now to
Mm-hmm.
restore and recover. So that's a wonderful thing.
Okay, awesome, awesome. So, what are some of the ways? And so, a lot of our questions is going to focus on what you're doing now, the
Sure.
amazing achievements that you've had. I do want to set the groundwork. So, I would love one of the things I noticed, and this isn't really a question. It's
Uh-huh.
more of an observation about what you received at the school in Oregon, which was really
Yeah.
opening for me in that you are learning about, I didn't realize, it's not going to a school for the blind where you're learning your ABCs only. You're really opening it up for us so that we understand it's how
Yeah.
to use a cane, how to love and appreciate your body as a blind child, how to use the typewriter. I'm assuming that's what you will need to transcribe what you're hearing. It's a 360-degree adaptation, it sounds
Yeah.
like. Anything else you'd like to share about that? I think it was
Yeah. Yeah.
fantastic.
So
Mm-hmm.
three things I was given, and I've touched on them. So three things I was given at the school as a 6, 7, 8 year old that
Mm-hmm.
we now know research shows that these are indicators of success for
Mm-hmm.
blind adults in life, thriving in employment. So one was the blindness skills. I was totally blind. There wasn't any question, does this kid need to learn Braille? Does this kid need to learn how to use a cane? I needed to learn all that stuff. I learned how to type as a 6-year-old so that when I was ready, I could go to public school where, sighted teachers, sighted classmates, so I could type my spelling tests, type my papers. And when the other kids were studying penmanship, I was, practicing my typing. But so I was given those strong blindness skills. I was given high expectations. So lots of kids, born in like me, I was born in a family had no experience, no connections with blindness. I was born to parents who were themselves high achievers, low income backgrounds, paid their way through college. My dad was a high school basketball coach for 40 years. They had high expectations of me. They expected me to contribute at home and do chores, and I didn't want to see anything less than an A on a report card and those things. And the school, a lot of kids have multiple disabilities. The blind kids with developmental disabilities, etc. But they expected if blindness was your only impairment, they expected us to be at grade level, reading at grade level, math at grade level.
Yeah.
So I was given those high expectations, and lots of kids with disabilities, their families, schools, communities don't understand the capabilities, so they don't have those high expectations of the kids, and sometimes that gets internalized. And then the third was that strong internal locus of control, which just means I just was baked into my bones that I could do what I wanted to do. I could figure it out. If there was an obstacle, I could overcome it. If there was a problem, I could figure out how to solve it. And that's opposed to a strong external locus of control where you just feel things happen to you, and there's not much you can do about it. So I was given those blindness skills, the high expectations, and the strong internal locus of control, which, now we know. And I did a PhD in leadership and change. I interviewed blind adults successfully employed in large corporations, and all of those things shown clearly through that all these people who'd forged successful paths in some very challenging environments had those three things.
Yeah.
So later on, I led the American Foundation for the Blind, and at some point they did some work with blind educators and developed a concept called the expanded core curriculum. And at some point, the blind kid gets the good news that, hey, blind kid, you need to learn all the stuff the sighted kids learn and 9 more things.
Yeah.
So you need to learn Braille. You need to learn how to travel safely and confidently with a cane. You need to learn how to use assistive technology like screen reading software. You need to learn self-advocacy so that if you are in a situation like I was with a chemistry teacher, you know how to self-advocate, which I did not know. I was not trained how to do that. And career exploration. We know that blind high school graduates know less about possible careers and jobs and the reality of work and business than their sighted classmates do. So career exploration is an explicit part of that expanded core curriculum.
So I was going to ask another question, but you just brought up something that I think is so important. So there is another person that I've interviewed who actually also lives in Seattle. He is a retired banking executive. And I bring this gentleman up, and I'm going to try to remember his name. He was also a guest on the Age Has No Limit podcast. He created a video library for primarily children of color. And what he's done is he's interviewed hundreds of people in different careers, and he's grouped them. And the name of his, and it's going to come to me, Vitaes, Vitaes. The name of his company is Vitaes. He's working with different school systems. He's already done a couple of pilots. And the reason why I bring that up is because it immediately made me think, something like that for blind children. I wonder if something like that exists where there is a database of blind persons who have, careers in different fields, so that they themselves can hear, here's what I do. And this is exactly what Vitaes does. Here's what I do. Here are some of my unique challenges because I'm a blind person. In the case of VTAs, it's here what are my unique challenges are because
Yeah,
I'm a person of color who's the first person who's ever, been in this field. Here's some of the challenges or differences, not necessarily challenges,
yeah,
differences you can expect to experience as a blind person in this career. And here are some resources to help you get to this. So it
yeah.
just made me immediately think about that. So does something like that already exist?
There are some attempts there. There's a website that AFB created that's called Career Connect. What this gentleman you mentioned is doing sounds a little more 21st century, but
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to connect with him more and more. So yeah, there are some attempts at that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there is a tried and true centralized resource,
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
families, schools, parents. But I would love to connect with this gentleman you mentioned.
Yeah. So first of all, I'm really excited to meet you because you're another indie consultant, just like I am. And I think that, there is like a certain and a special place for folks like us because we're not part of one of the big fours or even the medium-sized firms. We're our own
Mhm.
person, doing our own thing, solving problems for companies, really making inroads in our special niches and doing it on our terms, right? So I really
Yeah.
love to speak with other indie consultants. Tell us about Innovative Impact, your consulting firm.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Your age, I think age, but I started my business the same month I turned 61. So, um,
Mhm,
I could not be doing what I'm doing without that 30 plus years of experience because
mhm,
what I bring, how I add value is understanding systems. So
mhm,
there's a wonderfully informative book. It's not the most exciting read, but it's called Forces for Good.
mhm,
And they examined 12 social movements that had actual far-reaching transformational impact. And the
mhm,
first one they looked at was Habitat for Humanity, where it
mhm,
started out some volunteers building some houses, and now it's a global force for housing, justice, public policy, research.
mhm,
And the basic premise of the book is that in order to make anything really transformational happen, you have to align four sectors: the government, the corporate, the nonprofit, and the community.
mhm,
And I've spent a lot of time working in all of those sectors,
mhm,
and they're all uh, around employment of people with disabilities.
mhm,
They all have certain elements of those sectors that are focused on employment for people who are blind and have other disabilities, who have resources, expertise, infrastructure, funding, but they're all working very in silos.
yeah.
And so my opportunity is to work with an employer who is having some challenges around identifying, attracting, retaining top talent, and
Mhm,
have that conversation about there's an underutilized, untapped pool of very motivated, talented people who would love opportunities to contribute to your organization. And
mhm,
there are structures and resources available to you that are very underutilized, and we can put together a plan, connect with the right people in the government, corporate, nonprofit, and community sectors, and really supercharge your bottom line through disability inclusion. And part
mhm,
of that conversation, again, back to a book, The Talent Code, that talks about how do people develop strengths?
mhm,
How do chess champions become chess champions? How do world-class athletes become world-class athletes? How do concert musicians attain those skills? And it's through setting and overcoming increasingly difficult challenges. And in those structured environments, those challenges are laid out in a sequential, logical manner. I studied piano. I learned scales and chords, and how to play with both hands at the same time, and then learn some simple pieces, and then they got increasingly complex until I was playing music that 7 or 8 year piano student should be playing. So I understand how that works, but the fact of the matter is that people with an impairment, like I have a visual impairment, I can't see,
Mm-hmm.
in order to successfully navigate in our environments, the built environment, cities, airports, office buildings, the digital environment, websites, apps, the social environment, which are all constructed um, largely from the standpoint of people without impairments.
Mm-hmm.
Then, in order to navigate those environments, anyone living with a disability is facing challenges
Yeah.
daily,
Yeah.
constantly, problems to solve, situations to navigate. Um, so we develop some very unique strengths in areas like perseverance and resilience and creative problem solving and analyzing and managing risk and how to work in teams, how to put a team together,
Mm.
how to listen, how to communicate. So that's the conversation I have with employers. Um, and then for those who want to be proactive about enhancing their workforce by being more inclusive of people with these unique talents, then we bring the right people around the table from the government, the corporate, the nonprofit, and the community, and make some things happen.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of fun.
I'm sure it's a lot of fun, and it's opened up my eyes to a few things too. So number one, I think you said the four sectors are government, nonprofit, corporate,
Community,
and community. Okay.
right?
And because you worked in all four sectors, of course, you've been able to take your experience and understanding of the challenges within each sector to then,
Yeah, and it's relationships too. I didn't mention.
yeah.
I mean, I've been doing this stuff, like I say, 30 plus years, and I've worked on a lot of projects and I've made a lot of great things happen. And
Mm-hmm.
through that, I have these experiences. So, I started my PhD when I was 49 because I got clear that leadership was the, an accelerator that's sorely lacking in the blindness
Mm-hmm.
community as
Mm-hmm.
far as blind people being in leadership positions. So I felt I should study that formally, and I got a PhD in leadership and change, which
Mm-hmm.
I finished in 2019.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started my consulting practice, like I said, two and a half years ago,
Mm-hmm.
the month I turned 61. And what I bring is not only knowledge of how all these structures work, but relationships.
Yeah.
I can call on people. I can say, hey, I'd appreciate an hour of your time, uh, bringing four or five people together to focus on an issue.
Okay.
And I have by the same token, I will do the same. People call on me.
Okay, that's awesome. Now, your target market, is there a particular kind of organization?
Yeah, yeah. It tends, and this is interesting because at the American Foundation for the Blind, we had a cooperative agreement with a
Mm-hmm.
federal agency called the Ability One Commission, and we
Mm-hmm.
are tasked with doing research to find three new lines of business
Mm-hmm.
that could be brought into the federal Ability One program
Mm-hmm.
that would lead to successful and meaningful careers in knowledge-based work for
Mm-hmm.
people who are blind. And we identified digital health or telehealth,
Mm-hmm.
contract management, and cybersecurity as the three. And I'm really doing a lot of great work in the cybersecurity industry.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that is just demand driven. There's 700,000 unfilled positions in cybersecurity in
Yeah.
the US on any given day. So there's a huge demand for qualified, certified people to do cybersecurity work. But
Yeah.
the companies I guess there's two categories. One is kind of the 50 to 200 million in sales, techy, rapidly growing,
Mm-hmm.
digital health, cyber, or advanced manufacturing
Mm-hmm.
that are having some challenges with growth around attracting, hiring, retaining enough good people.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other you mentioned I'm involved with three startups. It's five now since that
Mm-hmm.
was written. But the
Mm-hmm.
other space are kind of entrepreneurs, kind of techie startups that have a passion around making the world more inclusive for people with disabilities in some way,
Mm-hmm.
and have asked again for some advice from me on how to position the company and scale the company by bringing the government, corporate, nonprofit, and community elements together. So one is a AI powered platform to support people with glaucoma.
Mm-hmm.
One is around hearing loss and a subscription model for hearing aids that people can adjust and regulate themselves at home. Again,
Mm-hmm.
some AI in there.
Yeah.
One is a video game company that's making accessible video games featuring disabled superheroes. So, so
Oh,
quite a variety. So I I'd say most of the spaces I'm finding great interest in collaborating are in that technology driven space. Some heart-centered founders
mhm.
who want to do good by doing good, who want their business not just to deliver bottom line results, but have care about the community and making the world a better place.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. As a reminder, if you're listening to us on your favorite streaming platform, download this and any of our past episodes so you can listen on the go. If you're watching us on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe. Now back to the podcast. So, we hear a lot about DEI, diversity, equity,
Yeah.
inclusion, and the recent general sort of reversal of
Hmm.
DEI around the country at the federal level and, of course, at the corporate level as well, how that's impacting your work, your business, if at
Hmm.
all. So I'd love to learn a little bit more of that.
Yeah.
Or is it because maybe because you're based in Seattle? I don't know if many of your clients are in the
Hmm.
Northwest, and there isn't a lot of there still is sort of an adherence to the principle of DEI and DEIA.
Yeah.
So would love to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah. It hasn't impacted me directly as far as people not wanting to engage or people saying, I'm ending your contract
Mm-hmm.
because of changes in the views toward DEI. I would say it's a general air of uncertainty,
Mm-hmm.
and people are kind of feeling chaos,
Yeah.
some fear.
Yeah.
Um, I think there's just a profound and probably deliberate misalignment between the concepts of diversity, equity, inclusion, and meritocracy and competition.
Mm-hmm.
In my view, intentionally creating environments to be inclusive of people with disabilities is encouraging competition
Mm-hmm.
and steepening the criteria around meritocracy.
Mm-hmm.
Only 30% of us are in the workforce. There's 70% of people with significant disabilities who aren't in the workforce, and there's a lot of different factors
Mm-hmm.
leading to that reality. But the fact of the matter is that employers are largely unaware of the capabilities of people with disabilities and those unique strengths that we developed that I mentioned before.
Mm-hmm.
So, with their lack of awareness, allowing their decisions to be dictated by their misperceptions,
Mm-hmm.
they are strategically cutting themselves off from talent that
Yeah.
they could be bringing into their organization. So, as an example, I got a full academic scholarship to a college called Whitman College in Walla Walla, and I
Mm-hmm.
graduated Phi Beta Kappa and cum laude with a
Mm-hmm.
4 point in my degree of economics. And I,
Mm-hmm.
started applying for jobs. I wanted to work in Seattle where there was public transportation, and I wanted to marry my college sweetheart and buy a house and have kids, and I did all that.
Mm-hmm.
I was applying for these entry level financial analyst jobs, and I would send out my resume and cover letter, and I'd get a phone interview. It'd go great. They'd invite me in, for the in-person interview. I'd walk into the office with my long white cane and my slate and stylus and braille paper to take some notes in braille. Not blaming anyone, but the employer sitting across the table who probably never worked with a blind person in their life would sit across from me, and they would think to themselves, how could this blind kid do this job? If I woke
Mm-hmm.
up tomorrow and I couldn't see, I there's no way I could do this, because
Yeah.
they weren't aware of the skills, the tools, the techniques. So I
Yeah.
started I wasn't disclosing my disability in that employment process until I walked into the room. So I changed my strategy and my cover letter. Said, I've been blind since age 5. This is how I've done what I've done. This is how I'll do the job. And then I wasn't even getting the phone interview. In those cases, those companies that did not give me a chance at that entry level financial analyst job missed out on a really smart,
Yeah.
capable young employee,
Yeah.
because they didn't have the information, they didn't understand. They
Mm-hmm.
were relying on perceptions, and who knows where those perceptions came from. Television shows, movies, books. There are deep-seated stereotypes and discrimination based on people's lack of exposure, lack of awareness, and that, of course, extends to people of color and women and people from other countries who live in the U.S., people with different educational attainments. So in my mind, a focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion is eliminating barriers that prevent the most talented people with the most merit
Yeah.
being engaged appropriately in the workforce.
That's a great way of putting it, because the idea is, and I'm glad you start with most talented folks with the most merit, and making sure they have access, not opening up the gate as wide as possible and letting anyone in and just kind of randomly picking, this person because they happen to be a woman and
Yeah, and
yeah.
merit, we could get into this. So is
Mhm.
merit, um, you know, uh, of course, graduating
Mhm.
from Harvard, Yale, Stanford,
Mhm.
Wharton business schools with a degree shows some level of merit. But
Yeah.
as we talked about, overcoming challenges, developing these strengths, also gives you merit. Um, I was visiting with a group of blind high school kids here in Washington State last summer, and there was an 18-year-old, really sharp, articulate young blind cat, and
Mhm.
he was applying for these entry-level jobs. He lived in a little town in Eastern Washington, and all of his friends and classmates were getting some sort of part-time job,
Mhm.
and he was having those challenges that many of us have. And I said to him, I don't know you very well, but I can tell that you're an accomplished, thriving young guy. And so I guarantee you have done something that's
Mhm.
outstanding that your classmates and neighbors of your age have not done. I said, I
Mhm.
don't know what it is. Was it, work doing chores on your family farm as a blind person? Was it taking care of your younger siblings? Was it creating some outstanding science project as a blind person? You need to highlight that, because
Mm.
these people are receiving dozens of resumes that all look the same.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
here's your chance to shine a spotlight on what you've done and what
Yeah.
you've accomplished and how you are going to be a problem solver for the employer, not a
Yeah.
problem creator.
Exactly. For those of you who are listening and you'd like to learn more about Dr. Kirk Adams and his work, check out his website, innovativeimpact.consulting. Again, it's innovativeimpact.consulting, not .com, .consulting.
Yeah. And I'm very active on LinkedIn. I've been building my
Mhm.
LinkedIn network for 16 years now,
Oh,
Patrice. I got
wow.
about 30,000 people who all
Wow.
care about disability inclusion in some form or fashion. So it's Kirk
Awesome.
Adams, PhD on LinkedIn.
Yeah, yeah. That's actually the next thing I was going to say. You can also find him on LinkedIn,
There you go.
at Kirk Adams, PhD. And I remember when I came across your profile, I was like, wow, he's got a really nice, clean, crisp LinkedIn name. I was like, he must have been here for a while, because it's not that, So, but yeah. So thank you so much for providing, some more background
Yeah.
into, how some of these changes that are happening can indeed impact people of different levels, and different abilities. And so thank you for that. Now, your firm has partnerships, your consulting firm, that is, has partnerships with accessibility, access information use, and others. So I'm still
Mhm.
going to kind of stay a little bit on, your work as an independent consultant. And
Sure.
I noticed that when I went to your website, because I'm always seeing about the benefits of indie consultants forming collaborative partnerships,
Hmm.
and with other consultants, and certainly with other complementary organizations that may not be consultants. How has these partnerships helped your firm? And I'm asking the question for those folks who are out there that are considering consulting,
Uh-huh.
or they have a consulting business, but they're still trying to accomplish everything by themselves in their little corner late at night
Yeah.
with that one white light and
Yeah.
the midnight oil.
Yeah. Well, there's a woman named Jane Way Skillern. It's WEI hyphen SKILLERN. And she studies network leadership
Mm-hmm.
and how leaders who are really effective work as part of networks. And she says, don't try to be a star, be part of a constellation. And
Mm.
sometimes you're the leader, sometimes you're the follower,
Yeah.
sometimes you're the initiator, sometimes you're a contributor.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm going to give someone some free advice for an hour or two and connect them with some people. And I always say, if this turns into real work, then we're going to have to talk about, an
Yeah.
engagement and a retainer. But
Hmm.
it's just a lot of fun. You read at the beginning, I want to focus on fun, innovative, high impact projects
Hmm.
that accelerate inclusion of people with disabilities in society. But I also say with people I like.
Yeah. Yeah.
So after leading two fairly significant nonprofits, the American Foundation for the Blind, the Lighthouse for the Blind, Inc.,
Hmm.
and being in those nonprofit structures, which I love and admire, and I love volunteers who serve on boards of directors and boards of trustees, but it's not the most nimble structure in the world.
Yeah.
There are processes and subcommittees and reviews and annual budget processes and things that are super important for that structure.
Yeah.
But for me now as a sole proprietor, I have a little team of contractors. I have a virtual assistant, Catherine, who's the best, who
Yeah.
does my scheduling. I have a social media person. I have a person who helps me make sure I am continuing to generate original content to maintain, a presence online.
Hmm.
And then I have some people who um, have that great detail mind who I can call on and say, oh, we're going to do a 4 hour strategic planning process. Will you be the note taker and summarize the notes and put it in a nice format afterwards? So I just bring in people with specific talents that I don't have
Hmm.
um, uh, as projects emerge.
Hmm.
And if something is not right for me, if it's not a fit for my level of expertise, I love to have a whole network of other people I can refer
Yeah.
and other people will refer to me. So it's just a lot of fun being part of these constellations.
Yeah.
And I tell people I've been asked, do you want to step in as an executive director of this nonprofit? Do you want to come on board as a full-time employee and do business development? And I just say I don't want to lead anything. I don't
Hmm.
want to own anything. I
Hmm.
just want to find really cool people doing really cool stuff where I can add value and help accelerate what they're doing and bring what I can bring, which is really knowledge, experience,
Hmm.
pattern recognition, and relationships.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, tell me again, I think you said her name is Wayne. I remember
Oh,
Skilling.
it's Jane is her first name, and her
Uh-huh.
last name is hyphenated. The
Uh-huh.
first is Way, Wei,
Hmm.
hyphen Skillern, Skillern.
Okay, great.
And
And
I had her, the
mhm,
American Foundation for the Blind, when I was there, has an annual
mhm,
leadership conference, and I loved Jane's work so much. I called her at Berkeley and asked if
mhm,
she'd fly out to Washington, D.C. and keynote our conference, and she
mhm.
graciously said yes. So I got to know her a bit. I really admire her work, and sometimes I just think about that as I'm kind of looking through my lists of people and organizations and trying to figure out how to help someone move something forward. Who should I call? Who should I recommend? I think about that. Be parts of constellations rather than trying to be the star.
I'm glad you said that because it's kind of reset, some thoughts that I've had around how I can be better in my role as a CEO. Dr. Adams, is there anything that you've wanted to pursue or to accomplish that you haven't pursued or accomplished yet? And do you mind sharing, at least one of those?
Actually, to do more speaking.
Oh,
So
okay.
I've talked from a lot of stages in my day, mostly representing the organizations I was formerly leading as the president and CEO, the
Mm-hmm.
American Foundation for the Blind, the Lighthouse for the Blind.
Mm-hmm.
Since I started my consulting practice, I've had one modestly paid keynote
Mm-hmm.
speaking engagement with a HR consulting firm called Archbright. They had their national staff meetings here in the Seattle area in the summer, and someone had actually read my dissertation and contacted me and said, "Could you do an hour keynote based on your dissertation?" So I did that,
Yeah.
and I received some compensation for it, and
Mhm.
I would like to do more of that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've had a couple of those as well, and that is also one of my goals. So yeah, definitely top of mind
Well,
for me.
let's compare notes on that, Patrice.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Let's definitely do that. Now, let's talk about your book, The Disability Dividend, Supercharge Your
Yeah,
Bottom Line Through Disability Inclusion. Where can we find the book? What is it about?
yeah,
And,
you can find it at the website innovativeimpact.consulting.
mm-hmm,
And it really is the playbook on how businesses can supercharge their bottom line through disability inclusion. And it
mm-hmm,
talks in greater detail about a lot of the things we talked about today. So
mm-hmm,
the four sectors, government, corporate, nonprofit, and community, how
mm-hmm,
to engage and align the strengths that people develop as people with disabilities. There are case studies of some companies like Walgreens, for instance, who's done an amazing job of including people with disabilities. I
mm-hmm,
visited their warehouse and distribution center in Anderson, South Carolina. There's a
mm-hmm,
chapter in the book which was designed in 2007 by Randy Lewis, who was head of Walgreens supply chain. He has an autistic son. He
mm-hmm.
got buy-in from senior leadership to design it to be inclusive of people with developmental disabilities. So they've tracked all their data, but 40% of their employees there have severe developmental disabilities.
Oh.
It's their most productive of their 20 distribution centers. They have the lowest absenteeism, the lowest turnover, the best safety record, the best employee satisfaction. Um, so I highlight some companies that are doing exceptional work, and then I have some chapters highlighting some individuals who have disabilities who have forged their path in employment, some of their reflections and some of their experience. So it's a bit of a playbook
Mhm,
for those businesses who want to think about how they can create a competitive advantage in their industry, in their marketplace by getting the best, most talented, strongest employees they can, they
mhm.
intentionally including people with disabilities.
Yeah, yeah. So, how would you say though, and I have two more questions for you.
Yeah.
How would you say you've proactively configured your life, once you were on your own in college, um,
Hmm.
to make it as satisfying as possible? In other words, you decided, number one,
Yeah.
your parents wouldn't let you,
Hmm.
and you had but but now, but once you became an adult, how did you continue that? And what are some things that you did to proactively configure your life to make sure it's as satisfying as possible?
A couple things. Oh gosh, 30 years ago, I was at some sort of leadership training and we did a values identification exercise where it was
Mm-hmm.
something like write down, I don't remember, 75 values that are important to you and cut it in half, cut it in half.
Mm-hmm.
My three at the end were love, community, and authenticity.
Hmm.
And I've gone through similar exercises. Those are my three.
Yeah.
So I try to do align my activities around those things. Um,
Mm-hmm.
the second, which is more recent, and I wish I would have done it before, is a mindfulness practice. My wife and I had moved to New York and then to DC when I was hired by the American Foundation for the Blind, and it
Mm-hmm.
was a severe financial turnaround situation. So I had to do a lot of difficult things as far as eliminating positions and
Mm-hmm.
closing programs and offices and selling buildings and just realigning everything, and went through a year-long strategic planning process that really totally redesigned the organization. And it was a lot. It was a lot of hard work. And we had left our lovely, quiet neighborhood here in Seattle, and we were living in a teeny apartment in Brooklyn, and then a apartment in Crystal City. And there's my alarm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but I was listening to a podcast one morning, and there was a woman being interviewed named Sonia Barigwa, and
Mm-hmm.
she um, has a tradition in her family from Kenya of bone healing, and she teaches narrative medicine at Columbia, and she
Mm-hmm.
was just talking about energy healing and how to clear, um, she called it the muck, clear away the muck. And I reached out to the podcast host and I said, I need to talk to her. So
Mm-hmm.
we got on a phone interview, and she took me on as a client. I was able to meet with her for a couple 4-hour intensive sessions in New York where
Mm-hmm.
she would give me a writing prompt, and then I'd write and read to her what she wrote, what I wrote, and then
Yeah.
I had a Zoom call with her weekly for a year or so. She just taught me some techniques to stay centered and grounded, kind of bring in the good energy, and I get move some of the negative stuff out. So mindfulness, I kind of dabbled with it in the past, but I really got serious with it around
Mm-hmm.
2017, and it's
Yeah.
been really transformational.
Yeah. Her name again is Sonia
Sa
Barikwa.
San Sanyu, Sanyu is her first name. Her
Mm-hmm.
last name is Barigwa, Birigwa.
Okay. Okay. So I'll be
Amazing.
asking for a friend,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So what are your recommendations for those who, even at 50 years or older, haven't figured
Uh-huh.
out how to restructure their lives? So you've talked about what you did.
Yeah.
Any suggestions
Um,
for how they could do that?
well, I'm becoming a bigger and bigger believer in intuition.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
as I've had a lot of experiences, I kind of have these, if I, they say if you can sit with the problem, if you can be quiet, still,
Yeah.
does this feel right? Does
Mm-hmm.
this feel good? Does this feel like a mistake?
Mm-hmm.
Um, it may not make a lot of sense on the surface, but is this something I should spend my time on?
Yeah.
What does my gut tell me? What does my heart tell me? Do I have
Mm.
bad feelings about this or good feelings about this?
Yeah.
I, you know, I don't know why this example came to mind, but back when I was managing fairly large organizations and talking to my senior leaders, and they would say, I think so and so might be going to leave the organization. Like,
Mm-hmm.
well, if they came into your office tomorrow and said, giving my 2 weeks notice, would you be happy or
Mm-hmm.
sad?
Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
you would be sad, then you need to be doing some things to make sure they stay with us.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I've just become I think values, if you can, I'm sure there's lots of tools out there to help you get clarity around what your personal values are. And then
Yeah.
if you keep those in mind, let them kind of be your guiding principles. And then when you're presented with an opportunity, a challenge, a problem, situation, just be quiet and still with it. Think about your values and
Yeah.
how does it feel? I think I did too much thinking in the first 20, 30, 40 years. So I think it's a lot more about feeling now.
Excellent advice. Excellent advice that anyone can easily follow. They don't need, a degree. They don't need, that's just excellent, excellent advice. And then my final question, what does an age has no limit life mean to you?
I think it means that every day when I get up and I write my little vision for the day, it
Mhm.
can um, it can go any direction that I want it to.
Yeah.
I've worked, a W-2 employee for somebody for over 40 years.
Mhm.
Um, we're good savers. We're good low overhead people. So I've have the financial resources to live a modest but sustained lifestyle.
Mhm.
So I can make choices based on what I want to do.
Mhm.
Um, and yesterday, our 11-month-old granddaughter was here all day. And so I had 3 or 4 meetings on the schedule. I did those meetings, but I did not do one other lick of productive work other than playing with Hallie and
Yeah.
my wife and having a wonderful time.
Yeah.
So I think it's freedom.
Yeah. Mm.
Um, that I don't have a boss. I don't have a board. I
Mhm.
have some people on my team who are contractors, not employees, and I've obviously have an obligation to treat them fairly and well,
Mhm.
communicate with them well. But my obligations have been stripped down to a
Mhm.
pretty small minimum. Um, in January 22, when I got clear that I wanted to, exit my role at the American Foundation for the Blind. If I look back at my calendar,
Mm-hmm.
it was full of things that were important, but they
Mm-hmm.
are mostly things that I didn't necessarily explicitly choose. So subcommittee meetings, budget meetings, performance reviews,
Yeah.
speaking with donors, reviewing policies and procedures, running staff meetings, all really important stuff that had to happen. But
Mm-hmm.
there was probably about 10% of that calendar, which was really orchestrated by me doing
Mm-hmm.
things that I was explicitly wanting to engage in for the sake of curiosity or innovation or
Mm-hmm.
creativity. So just I guess the liberation of the structure I'm in now, where I get to decide what I want to do, what projects I want to take on, which I'll pass, which I'll refer to someone else. It's just sometimes it's a little scary, but
Mm-hmm.
in general, um, no limits life to me is really about time freedom and
Yeah.
getting to intentionally and on purpose decide how to use my time.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I thank you so much, Dr. Adams, for sharing a bit about your life from childhood to, early career to where you are now as the independent consultant with the name of your firm again. I want to make sure.
Innovative
Innovative
impact.
impact. I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
So again, for those of you who are listening, if you'd like to learn more about Dr. Kirk Adams, check out his website, innovativeimpact.consulting. You can also find him on LinkedIn and become one of the 30 some odd thousand people that's following him. You can find him easily at Dr. Kirk Adams, PhD, of course, on LinkedIn. Thank you so much, Dr. Kirk Adams, for being yet another example for our guests to see and experience that age indeed has no limit. Thank you.
Cheers. Thanks, Patrice.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Age Has No Limit podcast. Except for when we take quarterly breaks, we release a new episode each week featuring people who decided to live a no limit life or featuring tips or lessons learned from me as I create my own no limit life. By the way, don't forget to subscribe. I look forward to sharing our next episode with you. Just remember, age has no limit.